Good evening. This is Erin O'Toole, leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. I'm pleased to welcome you to my telephone town hall, and we're also live on Facebook. Tonight, I'm talking with people across New Brunswick about the path to recovery and how Canada's Conservatives will secure the future. Je suis content de vous accueillir à mon assemblée de discussion téléphonique. Nous sommes aussi en direct sur Facebook. Ce soir, je vais discuter avec les gens de Nouveau-Brunswick. Je m'adresse aussi aux membres de la communauté acadienne. Ensemble, on va parler de la route vers la reprise économique. You'll have the chance to ask me any question about Canada's recovery plan. I announced that this week, our plan to get Canada's economy back on track and our country back on its feet. If you have a question for me, please press *3 now. That will let you ask me live. Or if you're watching on Facebook, please put a comment and question below. I want to be clear about this. I don't believe we should be having an election in the middle of a pandemic with forest fires out of control in British Columbia and with everything happening in the chaos and sad situation in Afghanistan. A leader should be thinking about how to meet the threat of a fourth wave, how to help folks in British Columbia, how to make sure Canada stands by people who are at risk because of serving alongside our Canadian Armed Forces and our aid providers. It's frankly reckless to be calling an election at this critical moment. Instead, once again, Mr. Trudeau is only focused on his narrow political interests. After years of over-promising and under-delivering for New Brunswickers, Mr. Trudeau thinks he should be rewarded with the majority. There may be 4 parties on the ballot, but there are only 2 choices: Canada's Conservatives or more of the same. Together, the Liberals, the NDP, and the Greens have an agenda of more borrowing, more debt, higher taxes, fewer job opportunities, and skyrocketing prices and inflation. Only Canada's Conservatives will consistently stand up for hardworking Canadians and their families and an economic recovery in all sectors of our economy and in all regions of our country. That's why we're running on Canada's recovery plan. And hit *3 if you have a question about this plan. It's 5 pillars to get Canada's economy firing on all cylinders, including in New Brunswick. We must work together. Et on a un plan de rétablissement du Canada avec 5 piliers. Si vous avez une question en français, I'm ready to answer questions in both official languages. It's our plan, the recovery plan, to secure our future. 1 million jobs in 1 year lost during the pandemic. Accountability laws to clean up the mess in Ottawa. A national program and leadership on mental health with our Canadian Mental Health Action Plan. Building capacity to respond to future pandemics and threats. More made in Canada, more self-reliance. And the 5th pillar is the economy, securing our economy by balancing the budget over the course of the next decade. Canada's Conservatives will secure the future of communities in New Brunswick and across Atlantic Canada. I'm looking forward to hearing from you tonight and being accountable to you. Press *3 now if you have a question for me, Erin O'Toole, leader of Canada's Conservatives, or put a comment below if you're watching along on Facebook. I'm so fortunate to have one of my good friends and one of our caucus members acting as moderator tonight. Over to you, Eric Duncan.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you, Erin. It's great to be back here with you tonight. It's been great the first few days of the campaign, doing these teletown halls, being online, and connecting with tens of thousands of Canadians across the country. My name's Eric Duncan. I'm the Conservative candidate in the Eastern Ontario riding of Stormont Dundas South Glengarry, and I'm going to be the moderator tonight as best as I possibly can here. So I support Erin O'Toole's vision for Canada, and I'm proud to be part of the team. Erin was raised in the working community of Bowmanville with the middle-class values of hard work and helping your neighbor. Before his career in politics, he served our country in the Royal Canadian Air Force for 12 years and sailed with our Atlantic Navy. Erin stands up for hardworking Canadians. He wants to work for you and to make sure that for generations to come, Canadians can grow up with world-class services, a healthy economy, and healthy finances. So we're about to start the telephone town hall here. Again, a reminder, we're going to say this a lot tonight, *3 to ask Erin a question. Just a reminder, *3. And again, if you are on social media, on Facebook, put a comment in. I'm going to be seeing some of those questions coming through. So Erin, we've actually got our first question here, and it comes from Sheila. And Sheila, I'm going to have you go ahead with your question. I believe you want to speak about seniors. You're on the line with Erin O'Toole, Sheila. Are you there, Sheila?
Hi, Erin.
Hello there. Go ahead, Sheila.
Yeah, I'm standing right here.
Go ahead.
We're getting an echo, aren't we?
Maybe turn your computer down if you can, if you've got it on computer or on your phone. But what's your question, Sheila?
I don't. I just maybe it's this darn tablet there. How's that?
There we go.
Okay, Erin. I'm glad to meet you, dear. Even though it is a long ways away from
You're
you.
hearing me in stereo, it sounds.
I love it.
Yeah, I'm from New Brunswick, Canada, and the Mamershee.
Oh, I love it. I was there a month ago.
I know, with my little cousin, Jake Stord.
He's an amazing candidate and experienced, and well, you're related, so you're definitely voting for Jake, but you need to get hundreds more to vote for him. He'll be a great MP. He's a fighter.
Oh, yes, he's a real fighter, he is. But what I want to ask is, how come, like, seniors like me that just have the Canada pension and the old age pension, and how come I have to live on so little?
Well, Sheila, I hear that all the time, and thank you. And maybe I can ask you one thing for people listening in. Did you know we were going to call tonight, or did you just pick up the phone and it was me?
She might be off here now. She might have been finished. She had done.
There we go. With many seniors, they're probably the most impacted from the inflation we're feeling, because seniors on fixed income, as you said, with CPP and old age security, they are not seeing those benefits increase much, but they're seeing costs go up for groceries, for gas, for municipal taxes, for all kind of services. Everything's going up, and people on fixed income, but even working families, aren't seeing an increase. So we're going to try and help people get ahead. Certainly we want to, with some seniors that are transitioning out of the workforce but working slightly in retirement, the Working Canadians tax benefit, we're going to have basically a $1 per hour raise for the lower income threshold. And some people are stepping out of the workforce into that. For others, we're going to have relief in a variety of other ways, including our GST holiday that we're planning for December. After the pandemic, people are stretched. People that were already finding it tight before the pandemic are now falling behind. So we're going to do a GST holiday to end the year to help people, but it will also help small businesses, because we're going to restrict that holiday to bricks and mortar stores. We're also going to make sure that seniors' benefits keep pace with the needs. And our biggest concern right now is the inflation under Mr. Trudeau, coming from a variety of reasons, but also his runaway spending that he has no plan to get under control. And just yesterday, he said that monetary policy and by that inflation doesn't impact families and doesn't cause him concern. Well, most families I hear from are worried about the rising cost of living. So Sheila, I want you to know we're always going to have your back, and Canada's Recovery Plan has some direct messages on that, and I'll get Jake Stewart to deliver one to you personally, Sheila.
Small town New Brunswick, the candidate's family member in the first one. So we'll go to the next question with Ewan, I believe, and has a question on uniting our country. Ewan, go ahead. You're on the line with Erin O'Toole.
It's Ian. I'm from Moncton, and my question is, I've never seen a country as divided as it's been since Trudeau. The West is wanting to separate, Quebec's wanting to separate again. What is your plan to turn back the time that Trudeau is separated us?
Well, thanks, Ian, and sorry about the name. The country is divided. I was talking about that earlier today in one of my media availabilities. I've actually never seen the country so divided. there's a number of people giving up on the country, and I think we have to show them that Canada is the best country in the world, and we can respect provinces and their ability to develop jobs in the economy for their citizens and work together and see less of this Ottawa knows best approach that we always see under Mr. Trudeau. We've seen that in his attacks on Western Canada, as you've said, but we've also seen that in Atlantic Canada. The Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency, an agency based on developing jobs and helping entrepreneurs and small businesses in Atlantic Canada, under Mr. Trudeau has never had a minister from Atlantic Canada. It started with someone in Mississauga, and then it moved to Montreal, so I guess Mr. Trudeau's kind of moving east. But that is an insult to the region where you don't even have a champion. And think about it, Ian, between 2015 and 2019, Mr. Trudeau had every seat in the region. So he takes Atlantic Canada for granted. We saw that also when he was going to remove the tradition of having a Supreme Court seat. We've seen that with his approach on the fishery. We saw just one of the scandals that his various ministers got into was Mr. LeBlanc being found guilty of ethics violations, awarding clam licenses to a relative with no fishing background. So we're always going to stand up to make sure that we can see jobs and opportunity. We're going to make sure small businesses, particularly in travel and tourism, which is important across Atlantic Canada. And Moncton, your area, Ian, has become such an important hub in the Maritimes. We also need to make sure we're growing markets for seafood and a range of other export products. And I think Moncton has the real potential to shine as Canada's recovery plan gets rolled out.
Just a reminder, if you're listening on the telephone town hall, we want to hear your questions for Conservative Leader Erin O'Toole. You can press *3 to ask a question, and we're starting to see those line up. If you're joining us in social media tonight, you can comment, and our team is sharing some of those with me there. Our next question is going to be Joshua from St. John. You're on the line with Erin O'Toole, and I believe you want to ask about some of the Liberal ethics violations and corruption happening these days. Joshua, go ahead.
Hi, Aaron. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Joshua. How are you?
Are you there?
I'm here.
Good. I was just wondering, Trudeau there, the Prime Minister, he's had a lot of ethical violations from like SNC Lavalin to Agus Khan, you name it, he has his fingers in it. My question is, if you become Prime Minister, I've noticed that in a lot of the, seminars that the Liberals and Conservatives, they all get into to do investigations into things. I noticed the Liberals, they impede the investigation. They run out the clock. They talk about nonsense. I've watched a lot of these meetings with Michelle Ripple and stuff. And I'm just wondering, if you become Prime Minister, are you going to open up the books to all these ethical violations that Trudeau has done? And if these investigations that you open up, if you do, they turn up evidence that he has impeded, SNC Lavalin and all that stuff, will there be charges possibly for that, if the RCMPC is warranted?
Well, listen, Joshua, I'm glad you follow things. There literally was a cycle of filibusters at multiple committees, and most Canadians don't know that because they don't follow what happens at committees. I'll tell you, we couldn't get anything really looked at because the Liberals didn't want to answer any questions, whether it was on COVID response, whether it was on vaccine contracts, whether it was on the We Charity scandal, whether it was on now the Winnipeg lab situation where scientists with ties to the Chinese military were at our top secret lab in Winnipeg. Not only are they covering that up, Mr. Trudeau is going to court to stop Parliament, which has asked for disclosure of the documents. It's unprecedented. So then I had to, as Leader of the Opposition, go to court as an intervener to say, wait a minute, you can't use the courts to continue your cover-ups. It's unprecedented. They're inventing new ways to cover things up, Eric.
Got to get creative.
So look, we have as our second pillar, Joshua, in our Canada's Recovery Plan, a section on accountability. Canadians deserve transparency, including on things like the Winnipeg lab situation. I've committed to, within the first 100 days, releasing those documents, and we can make sure any intelligence sources are protected. But we deserve to know what happened, as do our allies that are investigating ties between labs and virus sharing and gain of function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. These are legitimate questions, and we shouldn't be seen as impeding things. We're also going to start putting penalties down. So you mentioned Mr. Trudeau's holiday that broke the law. You're talking about SNC-Lavalin. The cycle of these offenses, there's no penalty. Some offenses of the ethics regime, if you violate them, you might get a $500 penalty. I'm actually going to make sure there's a fine attached to all offenses, and serious repeat ones will have a fine of now $50,000, not $500. The ethics regime, Eric, was set up basically based on an honor system, and that you'd feel shame if you offended it, and that shame would be bad on a politician. We have a prime minister that seems to have no shame. Multiple violations, and what does that say to his team? I already talked about Minister LeBlanc from New Brunswick, also found guilty under the ethics laws, Mr. Morneau. So we have to restore public faith. We have to have inquiries into sexual misconduct allegations in the Canadian Armed Forces, another subject to cover up. So Joshua, we're going to shine the bright light of accountability on not just the Trudeau government, but I want us held by this standard because Canadians deserve better.
All right, up next we have Kim from Bridgerton that wants to ask about the carbon tax. Kim, go ahead. You're with Erin O'Toole. Are you there, Kim? We must have lost her, but no need. The next one I see here, no problem. Jim Kelly has got a question here. We're going to go live with you, Jim. I believe you got a question about climate change. Go ahead, Jim.
Are you there, Jim?
We're losing some.
Why don't you try one from Facebook or social media? Do we have one there?
You can say there. About healthcare policies, Mark from St. John has a question about healthcare policy, wanting to know what is going to happen with healthcare transfers in the provinces. We'll leave it at that. Start with that.
Well, thanks, Mark. Canada's recovery plan details how we will approach healthcare transfers to the provinces, because the provinces deserve a predictable and stable cycle of funding. The federal government needs to be a partner, not a dictator saying, here's what you need to do, I'm going to put limits on this. So we won't put conditions, and we will have a minimum of 6% annual increase to the health care transfer. That, I think, is a minimum based on us being able to grow the economy. If our Canada's recovery plan really kickstarts a recovery in the way I think it could, getting everyone back to work in all sectors and all regions, we would then increase that. But we feel it's fair to our provincial partners. I've had great calls with Premier Higgs. It's fair to make sure that we're giving that stability for planning. Our third pillar as well, Mark, in Canada's recovery plan is a national mental health action plan. So we won't have conditions on increased funding for mental health, but we know the provinces want to dedicate funds. One of the most tragic suicides I read about in the last year and a half was a young woman from Fredericton, and it reminds us of the need for a 988 suicide prevention hotline. It reminds us of the need to work across party lines, across government levels, to really make sure supports are there and stigma is really reduced. So helping nonprofit groups on the ground expand their services through a granting program is also part of our plan. As well as incentivizing employers to provide more mental wellness support programs and benefits for their employees. It's not only the right thing to do, particularly coming after a pandemic. I know, having worked for some really good corporate employers in the past, these programs help your workforce become more productive because people are better on top of their mental wellness, and you'll get better productivity. So Mark, there's so many ways we're going to be talking about working with our partners, the provinces, on healthcare. Addiction is another area where we have a major commitment to funding beds for treatment. So you're going to see us really focusing predictability and respecting the provinces, but also partnering and really accelerating a mental health response.
All right, I'm going to try here again. We've got Kim back. I'm going to see if we can connect on that. I know the environment's an important issue for a lot of Canadians, particularly in New Brunswick, I'm sure as well. So Kim from Bridgerton, We'll try again, take two here. You're on the line with Erin O'Toole with a question about the carbon tax.
Hi, it's actually Kim from Frick.
Well, sorry about that, Kim. Go ahead, though. You're on line with Erin.
Oh, that's fine. I was just wondering, the carbon tax, are you going to abolish it? And if so, how? And if not, why?
Great question, Kim. What I've put out in April is an alternative to the provinces on meeting our Paris commitments, reducing emissions, but minimizing the drag on our economy brought about by Mr. Trudeau's carbon tax that he's now tripling after saying he wouldn't, but also making sure we get emissions down in a way that actually allows households, small businesses, farming operations to actually understand their carbon footprint and make decisions about getting that carbon footprint down. So what we've proposed to the provinces, Kim, is a personal low carbon savings account that would allow people to see a price on carbon but not send tax dollars to Ottawa. So if you, over time, I know in Atlantic Canada, having lived there, a lot of people heat their home with home heating oil. And then if you drive, you're seeing many times where you may be paying Mr. Trudeau's carbon tax. Our price on carbon would be a third of Mr. Trudeau's, but the price would be paid into your low carbon savings account, and then you could make decisions with your own money to lower your footprint over time. It's a new way of looking at a problem I want us to tackle. So I think Canadians want us to make sure we meet our Paris targets, but minimize the loss of jobs or investment. In fact, some of the policies in our program on carbon capture and utilization sequestration, small modular reactors, and I've spoke to the folks at Point Lepreau on this, for example. There are ways we can actually accelerate some economic development with our climate change plan. But Kim, for me, it's important for Canada to meet its commitments. And so we've presented a plan that we're going to put before the provinces to consider as an alternative to Mr. Trudeau's plan, or if they come forward, as Premier Higgs did, with a variety of initiatives and policies to meet their own emission targets, I want to work collaboratively. So as long as we meet our commitments, we will work collaboratively between the federal government and the provinces on climate change. This is an important issue to me, and I've said to people, we must meet our commitments, and we spent a lot of time to get a policy right that I think can do that, Kim, without the negatives of the carbon tax.
Our next question comes from Robin, who wants to ask a question on firearms and the Liberals not addressing the actual issue. Robin, go ahead. You're on the line with Conservative leader Erin O'Toole.
Hi, Erin. Thanks for having me tonight. My question is on firearms. We've seen a lot of tragedy in Canada over the last few years involving firearms. The Liberal government has taken action, but they haven't actually done anything to address the problem. What they've done is they've targeted law-abiding citizens who actually have a license for firearms and made certain firearms illegal. That isn't really going to address the problem of illegal weapons on the street in gangs and so forth. What are your thoughts on that? And if you were Prime Minister, what would you do?
Well, thank you for the question, Robin. And particularly Atlantic Canada in recent years has known its share of tragedy here. In fact, the Moncton shootings years ago that killed some of our RCMP officers, I had one of the spouses as our speaker this last year at the Sam Sharp Mental Health Breakfast talking about the impact of trauma on families. And Romeo Dallaire and I had her talk about just the tragedy around Moncton. And then, of course, Nova Scotia, we saw that terrible attack amidst the pandemic that ended up wrapping up not far from where my wife grew up. And now there's an inquiry into response and a whole range of issues. The issue with the Nova Scotia case is that person was a known public health or public safety risk, had instances of domestic violence, and was using illegally obtained firearms. So that's really where we have to really dedicate ourselves the most, is stopping the ability for people to get contraband smuggled firearms from the United States. That any law enforcement agency will tell you that has accelerated at a massive rate in recent years. And when they get in the hands of public safety risks or criminal organizations or gangs, that is where we're seeing a lot of violence, particularly in Montreal in recent weeks, in Vancouver. It's been alarming to see the gang shootings and a range of things. So how do we partner with law enforcement, fix things at the border? And we've proposed working with the CBSA to stop the smuggling rings before they get to the border. We have to provide more resources for that. And not allow this narrative that Mr. Trudeau always brings, suggesting that hunters or sport shooters are some big public safety risk, when we know that's not the case. There is screening, training, and licensing for people that hunt, for example. And we know, because their names are run through the CIPIC police system every day, that they have an obligation to be a law-abiding citizen to maintain their right. And so what we have to do is focus where the problem is. This is why, Robin, Mr. Trudeau tried to stop the public inquiry in Nova Scotia. He brought in an unfair order in council with no debate. Parliament wasn't even sitting. And then it came out that the perpetrator in Nova Scotia was using illegally obtained firearms. Well, that worked contrary to Mr. Trudeau's spin on this. Let's focus on public safety. As a parent, I want to make sure our communities are safe, and every law-abiding firearms owner has the same opinion. So let's make sure we tackle the real issues. We don't try and divide rural versus urban and the things the Liberal Party always tries to do. And this is important to me, to get the balance right. We've got details on that in Canada's recovery plan that I think will work with law enforcement, work with the CBSA, get the illegal weapons off our streets, and make sure that public safety is a priority.
Absolutely. We've got a lot of great questions coming in here, both on Facebook and through the Teletown Hall. Reminder, if you're listening in by phone, *3 if you have a question for Conservative Leader Erin O'Toole. We've got a few here in the queue, lots of great questions coming up. Let's go to Anne next. That's got a question on young people, CERB, and getting people back to work. Anne, go ahead. You're on the line with Erin O'Toole.
Yes, I just want to know what you're going to do with all this money being handed out, and no one wants to go to work. There's too many young people. There's jobs out there, and they've got to get some pride back and want to get out to work. They've got to do something. We met a guy that we offered where he could get a job for $40 an hour. He said no, because I don't want to work that many hours. I want to be able to get my free money in. We're not helping these young people. We have got to do something to get them off sitting around being paid. We are so far in debt from just handout. We've all worked, and we may not have liked our job, but we worked at it. So I just want to know what you're going to do.
Well, listen, Ann, I love the way you phrase that, because I've often said that there's a nobility in working. And I'll often say, if you get up early in the morning to work, whether it's out west in the energy sector, whether it's a small business owner in Moncton or Fredericton, whether it's a farming family, whether it's a student going to McDonald's, there's nobility in that work. And as you said, Ann, even if you don't like your job, there's even more nobility if you're putting the need to work and provide for your family or for yourself. That's an important part of our social fabric. And what I'm constantly amazed at, whether I've been in Brampton or Surrey, I meet people that came to Canada with virtually nothing, and it'd be the same with you, Eric. And within one generation, they're employing 30 other people. I met one gentleman in Brampton that's employing 300. Nice. Making donations to the hospital and to local schools. And there are now dozens of families relying on that person who came to Canada with very little other than the desire to work and have freedom to have opportunity. That is our Canadian story. And so what we have to do is wind down the programs, including the CERB, in a way that's fair and focused on getting people back to work. And for the people following, especially online, and you probably can't see this, but I'm holding up Canada's recovery plan. On page 17, our jobs surge, Canada's job surge. That's exactly what we need to do to focus on government supporting the creation of jobs, including 50% covering the new hires for people that have been chronically unemployed for longer than 10 months or so because of COVID, because there will be some jobs that may not come back. So let's incentivize hiring. Let's not incentivize more reliance on the CERB. I also think it was terrible that the government, in the middle of the We Charity scandal, where they were going to give $1 billion program to their friends to administer, they put students on CERB. Had they fired some of that money into small businesses who were in crisis, community organizations, nonprofits, to take more students in the Canada Summer Jobs Program, quintuple that program, there would have been enough money left over to also give all students a tuition credit for half the cost of the CERB. So I think we always had to help people and have people's backs in this pandemic, and we've tried to in opposition. But the government just keeps doing the same things they were doing at the start of this pandemic. They don't learn. So Anne, I think we have to get people back to work, wind up the programs, and really use the EI system and the job surge to help people find an opportunity. And I said, to get this country working again, Canada's recovery plan, as I said, there's a whole section here. We're the only team with a plan, so Anne, spread the word.
Thank you very much, Anne, and agree. Anne, we both got jobs. We like our jobs, and we're looking for a promotion next month is what we're looking for, and it's great. So thank you, Anne, for that question. And for those who are participating on the Teletown Hall, we want to ask you a question. We want to get your feedback on what you've heard so far from our Conservative leader, Erin O'Toole, who's asking for your support. We're going to do a bit of an interactive question. We're going to ask, if you're planning on voting Conservative, if Erin and our team can count on your support, to press 1. If you're going to be supporting another party, press 2. And if you're unsure at this point, let us know as well by pressing 3. Again, 1 for supporting Conservative, 2 for another party, 3 for unsure. We want to keep hearing your feedback. Fred has a question. I appreciate his patience here on the line. Fred from St. John's got a question about what we would do, the first thing we would do to improve the economy. Fred, go ahead. You're with Erin O'Toole.
Yes, since the time you've started, you've already answered quite a few of the questions I may have asked if we had a lot of time. One of the things I'd like to point out is we have an absence of interest by young people. And this morning when I picked up the paper in the local area, a headline came out that I thought, why didn't we think of that more? And that was, if you want the young people involved, you've got to get where they're at, not bring them to where we're at. And I thought, isn't that so true? Because I have 5 of them now all ready to vote. And that's the thing, that the absence of the interest of the young people in what's going around seems to be on everybody's tongue. But they don't realize that the people today, the young people today, communicate in a whole different manner than when we did when we were doing elections in 1930 and 40 and 50. So I'll just point that one out because you've answered part of my question, and I thank you very much, and I'm a new convert.
Oh, well, that is making the calls worthwhile, Fred, and I appreciate it. And let me say, I had a great visit to St. John about a month or so ago, because we've got an amazing candidate there. Mel Norton, the former mayor of St. John, a community leader, business person, is a great candidate. I had a great couple of days with him, and I toured the port. And I did a video there, Fred, because what's incredible about our country is I went in a, you probably saw this, Eric, I went in one of the warehouses by the port that's being expanded, and there was a pile of potash from Saskatchewan in St. John, New Brunswick, going for overseas export. We're the leading exporter, leading democratic exporter of that critical resource. And this is an example of why the resource wealth in Western Canada leads to hundreds of jobs in the port of St. John. We also looked at the major expansion of the shipping container facility there that was announced when I was in the last Conservative cabinet. And some of these large infrastructure investments take several years to realize. So it was great to be there with with Mel Norton to see this and meet with the container port group. They've just secured a major worldwide shipper, and they're now going to market this as a hub into North America. It's fantastic. Mr. Trudeau only gets about 60% of his infrastructure dollars that he announces out the door. That is not leadership. You know, he's very good at announcements, very poor at delivery. And I'll tell you, the other thing I was blown away from in St. John and in Fredericton when I was there, Fred, a month or so ago, the number of startup companies down there is incredible. I toured one that's a cyber hub in Fredericton, but there's also a number in St. John right down by the harbor. We've announced some amazing innovation policies that will help cultivate these hubs, because the young people, Fred, they can do world-class startup scale-up work in Atlantic Canada just as easily as they can in Kitchener, Waterloo, or Vancouver, or Ottawa, that are well known as innovation hubs. And we're unleashing, through patent box, through flow-through shares, really incentivizing those smart young people to stay in Canada and grow those businesses. So from the piles of potash to the resources in the heads, I love seeing the potential in Atlantic Canada, and Canada's recovery plan will tap that potential.
Wonderful. Our next question is coming. I know it's a key platform plank for ourselves, and our plan to secure the future is on mental health and addictions. Sybil, you're on the line. Sybil, go ahead.
Hi. I'm listening to everyone, and we're all talking about the young people and getting them out to work and things like that. A lot of that motivation is due to addiction. And we just do not have resources. And I realize that the province gets the money, is what I understood in the call, and then they decide how to work with it. But I've been dealing with an addict for 25 years. And I think that you should be having people that have experienced the pain, not to mention more help for people. And then you'll have more younger people with their heads on right. And not to mention all the suicides in St. John that I didn't hear about.
No, you're right, Sybil. I think one of the really bad, undercurrents of the pandemic has been inflaming mental health challenges and addiction challenges that were already there, but they're worse. The opioid crisis is now touching all parts of the country. A few years ago, it seemed to be something that was mostly a British Columbia challenge. It's a challenge in all communities. And addiction, given the pandemic, given dislocation in the workforce, given the stress of the time, has made it worse, which is why part of our Canada's recovery plan is going to be stepping up so that the federal government can be a partner. In fact, in our plan, and I refer to it because it is something we've spent a lot of time working on so that all Canadians can get back to work and we can tackle the issues our country's facing. Page 65 shows what we're going to do. We're going to start funding addiction treatment beds. We're going to step up in a major way to help communities as a federal partner. And I do think there's the ability for the provinces and the federal government to work together, and for some direct federal funding, because this is going to be a lingering challenge communities face, and it's heartbreaking. I've called it often the pandemic of tears within the COVID-19 pandemic has been the deaths of young people from opioids. So that action plan, that leadership, we're investing $325 million over the next 3 years to create 1,000 residential drug treatment beds and 50 recovery community centers. So a lot of a detailed plan, because Sybil, this is another issue that I hear in Atlantic Canada. My own area, the Oshawa, has seen an explosion of addiction, including opioids. We have a very serious plan to tackle this, and that's what I think Canadians want. A plan to tackle the challenges and opportunities there are for our country. Less of a government of photo ops, more of a government of action.
Louise is up next, and she has a question on deficits in spending. Louise, go ahead. You're on the line with Conservative Leader Erin O'Toole.
Oh, good evening, sir. I was inquiring. I've been told that the Bank of Canada is doling out $2 billion a week to the Liberal Party, and it's down from $3 billion.
Well, Louise, they're not giving it to the Liberal Party, but there has been quantitative easing, and of course the bank has also been there with respect to the bond market and to some of the acute challenges in Newfoundland and Labrador. And what we have to make sure is we grow the economy and get this massive spending down, because it is leading to inflation. Louise, just yesterday we learned that we're literally hitting the highest inflation rates in 18 years. And Eric, I'm sure it's the same in Stormont Dundas. The amount of people that will tell you groceries are more expensive, our bills are more expensive, gas is more expensive. And as I said earlier, if you're on a fixed income as a senior or family raising kids where you're on a budget, this spike in inflation is really causing harm. Add on that a lot of communities with the housing crisis, not availability of rental. So I launched our ambitious set of policies on housing today. We need to get ahead of this, and we need to get spending under control. And for the Prime Minister of Canada to say he doesn't concern himself with monetary policy because, you know, it doesn't matter to families. Wow. It does matter to families.
Absolutely.
And keeping inflation in the sort of 2% range, not up by 4% where it's getting now, that means whether people have a few extra dollars at the end of the month. So Louise, you know, we want to get spending under control. We want to help people get the economy, lift us back up on our feet, dust ourselves off after the pandemic, get people to work, as we were saying to Fred earlier, in all parts of the country, and then get spending down, stop this, you know, over-reliance of just government pumping out money. That can't be sustainable, and the real risk of Mr. Trudeau being re-elected is that will put healthcare, old age security, all of the programs Canadians rely upon are at risk down the road. If inflation leads to higher interest rates, we will see massive challenges. So we have to get ahead of this. We deserve leadership, and Canada's recovery plan is our roadmap to getting this country back on track.
All right, I want to go to Bob from St. John that's got a question here talking about voter apathy and voter fatigue. Bob, go ahead. You're on the call with Erin O'Toole.
Hey, hi, Erin.
Hi there.
Question for you. So, hi. What would you say to people like that have maybe turned away from politics and are disengaged? You know, perhaps for some of the scandals that have happened, you know, either south of the border, or even here. I mean, there's a lot of folks that are just don't have the confidence anymore. So assuming that you do get elected Prime Minister, what would you do differently to restore the confidence, interest, and people involved in politics, and maybe bring some more accountability in the overall process? Is there something you would do that was different than what's been done in the past?
Well, thanks, Bob. And you know what? What a great question, because I do see cynicism rising about politics and politicians. In fact, people, if you've seen me speak in person, I'll sometimes use a joke about how I was in the military and then I became a lawyer. People don't really like lawyers, so the applause sort of goes down. And now I'm a politician. And I think public service is honorable. And in fact, I was taught that if you work hard to be all you can be, use those gifts to help other people or to serve. That's kind of how I was raised. And so I really admire people that get into public life of all stripes. But when you see countless sort of examples of a prime minister who not only takes an illegal vacation, flies the jet full of his friends and cronies, including the president of the Liberal Party, like what makes him think that there's a level of entitlement for him to just entertain his friends and to flaunt the rules? You can see why cynicism builds in. You can see why some women might be questioning joining the Canadian Armed Forces when they learned that a woman filed a complaint 3 years ago that Mr. Sajan, everyone in Mr. Trudeau's office knew about, but no one acted on it. In fact, they fired the ombudsman she brought the case to. No wonder there's cynicism and probably challenges recruiting great young women who want to serve their country. So I believe fully in transparency, accountability. That's why our second pillar, Bob, is accountability and restoring trust in our federal institutions. Because you'll see If we see the cynicism continue and the division in our country, very, very quickly, people won't vote, they won't get engaged, and you'll see a total disconnect of Ottawa from the people it's serving. So I'm in this to try and bring people together. It's why on the second day of the campaign, I launched our plan. I want people to think about the future. I want them to judge us on what we're going to do. And when I was a minister, I delivered. I never made commitments I could not keep, even if it made people saying, you're not giving me what I want, I don't want to talk to you anymore. I would say, I don't want to lie to you. Mr. Trudeau lied to veterans in the 2015 election. He didn't bring back the old Pension Act. He was willing to lie to get votes. I've put forward a plan that we've costed, and we've now put it to the Parliamentary Budget Officer. We're saying that on the last page. Once they're done with the review, we will have another update, and we want people to hold us accountable because, Bob, we also want to renew people's faith in their federal institutions, and that's why it's in our platform. We know there's cynicism, and we're going to fight to earn your trust.
All right, we're going to go to Ken next that has a question about your Maiden Canada plan. Ken, go ahead. You're on the line with Erin O'Toole.
Hi, Mr. O'Toole. My question was just how will your Maiden Canada strategy be implemented? Will there be less reliance on like foreign countries and products and get our country back to where it should be?
Absolutely. In fact, if you want to go to page 58 in the document, Ken, it's online as well. I flash around the copy a lot, but we need to make sure that we're never again unprepared for a crisis. And that means more self-reliance in critical things like vaccines and critical medicines, but also PPE and other critical items. Food security is critical, and I did an announcement in St. Hyacinthe, Quebec, about making sure that we not only build up that food security, that we have a dedicated program to achieve it. We have to be self-reliant because we saw in the early stages of the pandemic, even with some of our closest friends, we couldn't rely on them. So we have to be self-reliant. I also want that applying to some critical industries as well, because for several years, I've said that Communist China, for example, has gamed global trade in steel, in aluminum in particular. And they sign accords, but they have no intention of meeting Paris because they were found to be violating the Montreal Protocol on reducing CFCs to help the ozone layer. So we have to start making sure that countries that game the rules-based system don't benefit from that. And whether it's using tariffs, using carbon border adjustment tariffs, or even tariffing steel and aluminum, as the Americans have now under 3 different presidents, we have to align with our allies to be more self-reliant and not let the bad actors of the world scoop jobs and opportunity away from Canada and hollow out our own domestic capacity. So there's quite a bit of detail in our plan, Ken, and I do think people would be happy to pay a little bit more if they also knew it was guaranteeing us a reliable, safe, trusted source. It's also why I'm proud of our shipbuilding capacity in Canada. Other things that I think we have to make sure that we don't lose, because when there's a crisis, you can't just create these out of thin air. So we've put some detailed thought into this, Ken. Please check it out. We hope we can earn your trust.
And I want to give a reminder again to put another pitch in again. We want to hear back from you. We've got some questions coming in. We've got a question for you for those that are on the Teletown Hall. We want to know if we can count on your support. If you like what you hear in Canada's recovery plan, you like what you're hearing from Conservative leader Erin O'Toole, we'll just say this: you can do interactively on your phone. Press 1 if the Conservatives will be your vote in the upcoming election. If it's going to be another party, you can press 2. And if you're unsure at this point, that's still okay. We got time for a couple more questions to change your mind. You can press 3. So again, Conservative support 1, another party 2, and if you're unsure, you can press 3. I want to go to Carrie Cole. I believe there's a question here on the nursing shortage. Carrie, go ahead.
Hi, Mr. O'Toole. I am a younger registered nurse in New Brunswick, and my biggest concern is how are you willing to work with the provinces to help improve nursing conditions and the shortage we're facing not only in New Brunswick but across Canada.
Well, thanks, Carrie. First off, thank you. As a RN in the early part of your career, you've already been through an incredibly challenging time with the pandemic, and I know the burnout for you and your coworkers is probably enormous. I've talked to many frontline healthcare workers, nurses, PSWs, physicians, technicians, people that clean the hospitals. Everyone is literally fatigued. And so thank you for doing that. Part of our mental wellness, we want to work with some of the granting authorities, maybe helping some of the burnout that we're seeing in front lines. There's a number of things we're going to do, Carrie, to make sure that we're a partner. The federal government can be a partner to the provinces, who obviously are the lead in healthcare. That's why we've announced in our platform a minimum 6% increase for the health transfer each year. That's where we think we can make sure that we land on that. But if we have better economic conditions, that would be a minimum. We would not tie, you can only spend this or that there, because we want the provinces who are much closer to the needs of their systems to be able to put the support where it's needed the most. Not Ottawa dictating, because I don't think civil service here knows better than the civil service in Fredericton, where the needs are, for example. But there are some distinct areas, as I've mentioned, of funding for addiction support, mental health, where we will also do additional things outside of the normal health transfer. And then, of course, foreign credential recognition. I actually announced, Carrie, before the election, a rapid task force to try and finally bring some conclusion to this, because we've seen, even in the pandemic, people that were in Canada either temporarily or as a permanent resident stepping up in huge ways in long-term care, the guardian angels they were called in Quebec. We need to make sure that we can have more of that, and if someone has foreign credentials, we need to, as much as possible, have those recognized before they even arrive. So we're going to bring all parties together and put a real emphasis on that. And there's a critical shortage and a fatigue level amongst nurses in all parts of the country. So I know the provinces, the unions, the professional associations, I know all of us, this is a time we can really tackle the credential issue as well.
Up next, we have Alan, who's got a question, I believe, on balancing the budget. Alan, go ahead.
Yes, good evening, Erin. I'm ex-Air Force as well, by the way. But,
thank you.
I have a sign in the front lawn. Oh, no problem. I have a sign in the front lawn supporting Rob Moore, so I guess you'll have an idea where my loyalties lie. But regarding the 10 years to balance the budget, I'd like to know, do you plan to do this mainly by growth of our economy? Thank you.
Well, thanks, Alan, and thanks for your service. Per ardua ad astra, something my caucus knows, because I would use that in many of my talks with caucus each week. Because, look, we've all had a difficult year, and it was hard for us not to be in person as much. Eric's on my leadership team, and he knows how we try and channel that adversity into working together on creating this plan, Canada's recovery plan. So, you know, from the military, they say, Alan, time in recce is seldom wasted. We spent a lot of time to have a plan that I think our country needs. So we were very careful to choose a timeline that we think we can achieve in terms of balancing the budget, getting our finances back under control, that allows us to do what we need to do up front, which is get the country back on its feet and get people working and help some of the highly impacted. The investments we're making in addiction, mental health, some of the programs I announced today in housing and other things, we need to make sure the country is well after COVID. And some of the folks that are really highly impacted are helped. And so balanced budgets are important, and our fiscal long-term stability is very important to me. But helping the country recover in a way that's compassionate and I think we all want to come together on is important. So that's why we've chosen that timeline. It allows us to make sure we balance the ship, get it headed on the right direction, But it's why we're focused and investing on jobs, including with the job surge, with our programs to rebuild main streets. Alan, we want to make sure that the 2/3 of Canadians who work for a small or medium-sized business, especially in hospitality, tourism, highly affected sectors, keep those jobs. That job keeps those families doing okay. That builds strong communities and a strong country. By reducing the programs and not just always extending every single one of them, as Mr. Trudeau keeps doing because he's just posturing for an election. Clearly, now we know why he extended them to October. He didn't want to have to come up with a plan. We think we can get people working and tackle the spending at the same time. And we're planning for what I would say is modest to strong growth, but our commitment is to always make sure we're straight up with Canadians, which is why we're going to issue a second edition of this once the PBO confirms our internal numbers or gives us a number that might be slightly different than our internal planning. Canadians deserve to trust their federal government. Not having a budget for 2 years, the longest G7 country to ever not have a budget, or certainly within the pandemic, that's not transparency either. So our plan is a combination of growth, help, timeline, and really making sure we're addressing productivity. And some of our investments in capital investments that we're encouraging companies to make, some of our innovation policies, I think will actually deal with our productivity lag. We've looked to what Australia and some other countries have done. That's really going to jet start some of our economic growth and balance the budget over the decade, Alan.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Erin. An hour flies by quite quickly here. Our Conservative team is ready to deliver Canada's recovery plan and stand up for hardworking Canadians and their families. That's why I'm glad you're leading Canada's Conservatives in this election. If you didn't get a chance to ask your question, please stay on the line and leave a message for our staff. Your question is important, and we'd like the chance to respond to you.
Absolutely. Well, first off, thank you, Eric Duncan. You're a great friend, great MP, great member of our leadership team. Eric's our question period coordinator, so he doesn't have question period to coordinate. So now you're coordinating town halls.
Different questions, just different setting.
Different questions, and hopefully answers,
that's true, yes.
As opposed to what we see from Mr. Trudeau. But look, I'm really proud of our team and the chance to talk to you in New Brunswick tonight. Alan says he's supporting Rob Moore, who's our Justice Shadow Minister, a great person. John Williamson, Richard Bragdon, and then of course in Fredericton, Andrea Johnson is our candidate. Great. She's the one that, when I was there, we were talking about the Afghan interpreters over a month ago. She's been fighting. Mel Norton in St. John. Darlene Smith in Moncton, a real trailblazer on mental health. She's going to fit really well in with our Canada's recovery plan. And then Jake Stewart in Miramichi Grand Lake, former minister provincially, MLA, stepping down from that role because he's so worried about the country. And we know his Aunt Sheila is very proud of him. So we were speaking to her tonight. So look, I would like to thank you for allowing me to speak to you tonight in your living room or in your kitchen. It's our view that too many Canadians have been left behind by Mr. Trudeau, especially Atlantic Canadians. And the NDP and Greens will not get your economy back on track. I think together with Canada's recovery plan, a detailed plan that we will deliver, we will secure the future for folks in New Brunswick and Atlantic Canada and from coast to coast to coast. I think Canada's best days are ahead of us, but we need a plan after this crisis. We need an ethical team focused on you, not on their friends and insiders. And we need to recommit to this country, which I think is the greatest country in the world. We have challenges, we have issues we have to deal with, reconciliation, inequalities, but recommitting, digging deep to harness that true patriot love. I think Canada's best days are ahead of us. So we ask for your support. Thank you for participating. Follow us on all the social media challenges channels, and we hope to see you on the ground in New Brunswick soon. Thank you and be well.